One of the areas that we need to manage when we're dealing with digital certificates is managing the certificate lifecycle. And in this video, we're going to cover the 8 different phases of our digital certificate lifecycle. And this basically helps us track and manage all our certificates in our environment, right? We need to know what's revoked, why something has been revoked, what's current, what's coming up for renewal, and ensure that we manage any risk associated with our environment and we're on top of those vulnerabilities or those risks that are associated with our digital certificates in our environment. So let's talk about the management of our certificates and the certificate lifecycle. So the very first phase that I'd love to jump to and talk about is our generation of certificates. So we've got to go away and generate our certificates. And this is all about different various policies that are assigned to that certificate, maybe the conditions the cert is being issued and how it's being issued. So basically, it's a policy that governs how those certificates are requested, how they're issued, the entities involved, and obviously the descriptive information regarding that specific certificate and how it's being issued. That's all about generating our certificates. Now, phase number two is our provisioning. And our provisioning phase is where 95% of the time where our technical people spend our time, right? This is the different types of certs and how they're being issued, as well as the instances which those certs will be provided. So to secure communications between obviously the different websites that are out there, and those if we're provisioning SSL for the environment, for example, well, what happens if we've got a large environment of devices or we've got a big corporate environment and we've got maybe IoT devices and we have to provision SSL certificates, right? Well, we simply want to distribute the various certs to all those devices. So typically, this would happen in the provisioning phase where we're going to go away and provision all our certificates to those devices in our environment. As we continue up through our discovery phase, and discovery is all about monitoring the capabilities of our digital certificates. So this is where we spend more time scanning the certs, looking for identity, looking for the identities of that are contained within our certificates, and ensuring that all certificates in our environment are three things, right? They're authentic, they can be verified, and they're trusted. So that's all about our discovery phase. Now, as we move into our inventory phase all about basically keeping inventory of all our certificates, right? We've got to keep similar to like an asset list of our infrastructure. We've got to have an inventory and an asset list of all our certificates, right? What's expired, what's in use, what's revoked. Basically, this is where we provide all those details about those digital certificates that we have. So description, purpose, chain of information, if it's linked to any other certificate or maybe intermediary certificate authorities that have been or are part of that process, our inventory will display all that information, right? So this is typically when the issue was issued, when that certificate was issued as well. So we'll obtain and keep all those records and all that information. Other things here, obviously, when the certificates expire, are they on premise? Which devices are they associated with? Have they been terminated because maybe there's been a compromise, or we've got to define why that maybe that certificate has been revoked. In our inventory phase, that's where we will define and have a list of everything like that. So as we continue up our inventory, we've got our monitoring phase, and our monitor phase is all about keeping track of all those certificates and ensuring that they're in good form and health, right? So we want to make sure that they're trusted, they're operating without any issues. Um, let's just say that today we're issuing a particular certificate in our environment. Now we've got to go away and set up a reminder for us that in maybe 2 years or 3 years, that certificate will have to be renewed. Well, sometimes that's challenging because we've got a bunch of certificates to deal with, chains of trust. Uh, there's just so many certificates that are involved in that process. Maybe there's intermediary CAs, maybe there's root CA that we have to manage and obviously communicate with and stuff like that. So sometimes um, we obviously want to make sure that everything has to function correctly, function nicely, everything is trusted or part of our trusted entity process. So having said that, we've got to go through, there's some particular challenges that are associated with this, right? So it's just not all about monitoring the use of our certificates. Sometimes malware can attack certificates, and basically then the algorithms will go away and render those certificates to be untrusted. So sometimes that could be challenging because anyone that could be visiting our website or visiting those specific web pages, well, then they'll be notified that the pages are not secure. So sometimes that could cause a chain reaction or things to break in the environment. Another challenge could be something like maybe the SSL certificate wasn't being set up correctly on the web server or on that specific server, and sometimes that could cause errors. Another common one that we've seen is having a less known CA. So if we've got a CA that is less known in the market or is less trusted, since it doesn't have as much authority as maybe another CA, sometimes there's going to be a challenge there when that entity has to vouch for its authenticness, right? So sometimes that could be another challenge with obviously the digital certificates. So that's all about our monitoring phase. Now, as we continue on, we've got our protect phase. So protection is all about how we're going to protect our keys, right? Our private keys particularly, and we're going to use something called the KEK, and this is the key encryption key. And this is the method where we're going to go away and use a key to encrypt all our private keys in our environment. From there on, we're going to go into our renewal phase. And renewal is all about basically renewing our certificates, right? No certificate lasts forever. So there's going to be some changes. Something will get expired. Something will be revoked. Some will be renewed. And then we've got to go away and have a renewal plan on how we're going to deal with that at that given time frame. So there's obviously ways that we can automate part of that process to obviously then help us define those certain periods of time that it doesn't buckle the environment, it doesn't cause significant issues. We can then go away, renew those certificates in a proper form and method. So renewal is all about renewing our certificates. And the final phase here, as we sort of talk about this, is our revoke phase. And revoke is all about understanding why a specific suspension of a certificate has happened in our environment. Now, a couple of revokes, or I'm gonna call it a revoke because typically what would happen is when a digital certificate gets revoked, well, sometimes the CA, the certificate authority itself, has to go away and revoke that certificate, right? So either we can revoke it as the organization and say, look, this certificate is no longer rendered. We're going to deem it as revoked. So we're going to revoke it. Or then the certificate authority can go away and revoke that certificate. So that's one method or one area of reason. Another area of reason could be sometimes that certificate could be compromised. So maybe malware attacks it or something has occurred with that specific certificate. Um, then the CA will then define that obviously the certificate authority will then define and obviously say that that certificate has been issued, has been compromised, then they've got the right to obviously go away and then revoke those certificates that are affected by that process. Now, let's just say another thing too is if a business is either rebranding or it's no longer trading under a specific operating name, uh, it's going to affect then its the company name, the web names, the FQDN, so the fully qualified domain names, all those again will be revoked. So even when users leave sometimes as well, we've got to revoke their certificates as well. So there's different things here that can obviously contribute to us revoking certificates. And sometimes when a certificate gets revoked, it gets added to a certificate revocation list. And a revocation list is basically it's owned and managed by the certificate authority. So it's that body that issues those certificates. And that's when we either rebrand to another company, we would then need to receive a new certificate for the new name that we have to get, right? So the CA would then need to obviously manage this CRO list, the certificate revocation list, and it basically ensures that it notifies all users that the certificate has been suspended, it's no longer valid, no longer in use, and the CRO contains a list of certs that have been terminated prematurely, right? So if it gets terminated prematurely, it's deemed as revoked, and obviously it doesn't reach its maturity, and therefore it expires, right? So CRL, maybe there's malware that attacks it, then we've got to prematurely suspend that certificate, it goes into our CRL list or certificate revocation list, and then obviously it's a bunch of lists that we can then view and see why the specific certificates have been suspended prematurely. So that's pretty much it when we start talking about the 8 different phases across our certificate lifecycle. The other thing is that I just want to sort of mention as I'm thinking of wrapping up is again, with our CRL list, sometimes there's old browsers. Now, the challenge with that is when we have an old browser or a legacy browser, those browsers don't do CRL checking, right? They don't have a certificate revocation list that they can go and check, and then obviously prove that that CRL is valid, and that can sometimes be a bit of a challenge, right? So that's one thing. Now, if we run into that, we would have to turn into the OCSP, and I was going to say Offensive Security Certified Professional, but it's not the OSCP, it's the OCSP, and that basically is the Online Certificate Status Protocol. And while I'm kind of thinking of that, it's basically answers the challenges with our CRL. So it basically proves the information. If a certificate is valid or not, we can go online to the portal, put in the information, and basically tells us it proves its validity, whether this is something legitimate or it's not legitimate. So it's that online service. It's fast, it's speedy. We can use it if we're typically dealing with a maybe a single cert in our environment. So that can be one challenge to circumvent any other issues that we potentially may have with our CRL lists. Well, anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. This ended up being a little bit lengthier than I kind of already sort of hoped for. In this video, we discussed the entire certificate lifecycle phase. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please let me know what you thought in the comments. If there's any other additional information that you need, please let me know. And hopefully get to see you in the next video. Bye for now.